My biggest advice for photographers is figure out what is going to have longevity for what you have and what can set you up for success in the future, even if things look different. And so that's why building on something that matters and something that's not just trendy and cool is important.
Welcome to Shoot the Veil, a mobile app made by wedding photographers for wedding photographers to help inspire you to create and equip you to grow. I'm Sam.
And I'm Donnie, and this podcast is about wedding photography as an art and as a business. Hey everybody, welcome back to Shoot the Veil. We're so excited that you're joining us today. We have a guy that you're going to flip out about. If you're a photographer, if you're a videographer in the wedding world, you know that you have a brand. You know that people think of something when they think of you. And we've got a guy with us, Phil Porto, who has been a photographer for over a decade. And he happens to also be a branding expert, and he's done some crazy stuff with his own brand. He helps other people with their brand. So we are so blessed to have him here with us today to help all of you think through your brand and think through how you're doing everything that you're doing. And we're just excited to get to know this guy. Phil, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, Phil?
What's up, guys? Appreciate you guys having me here. When you guys reached out to me and you were like, hey, a friend of yours, Miles Whitboyer, had us reach out about the podcast, instantaneously, you guys were in my good merits. Because when it comes to Miles Whitboyer, that's family right there. So anyone that Miles can put a stamp of approval on is instantaneously like good friends, good family for me. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. My whole thing has been since day one education, and I love being a resource to people. So the fact that you guys are dedicating your time and your gifts and your talents and experiences and stories to be able to into the community is something that I truly, truly love and admire. And I hope that people in this industry can realize what you guys are doing. Because before we go into the podcast, I want to give flowers where they're due. We are in an industry where ever since I got in, the idea of community over competition is something that's been said, but rarely ever practiced. Ever since I got into the industry, it's been one of those things where people want to say that from a platform, but they want to hold on to everything they know and all of their connections because they act like the pond is too small to see other people succeed. So they have to clinch on with everything that they have and everything that they know. And they only want to share those resources if they're paid to speak in front of thousands at a workshop. So thank you guys for actually living out a sacrificial here or information, here is our knowledge kind of platform. So appreciate you guys.
Wow. That's amazing.
Absolutely. Thank
we should
you for
just transcript all of that and put that at the header of the website. It's amazing.
Seriously.
That's good.
Wordsmithing. I love it, dude. It's so cool to be able to do this. We loved getting to have an intro call with you the other day and talk about your story and how you play into the wedding photography world and your personal life as you embark on the RV travel life. I'm so excited to even just talk about that. Let's just be human. And I want to hear all your stories about, deciding and taking the family on the, a trip around America. Tell me all about this.
Yeah, you went from wedding photographer, like super busy, to diving into an RV, but also still doing weddings. So how does that work?
Yeah, so for a long time, I was building what I thought was my plan, build this empire of wedding photography. And as I started to build it, I realized that it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. With a lot of businesses, if you're hands off, and there's some really not so good photography companies out there that will just let anybody kind of put their name on it as long as money comes attached to it. But with me, I wanted to keep the consistency, the focus on relationship with our couples, the quality that we put out. So I was involved in every part of the process. So from it just being what was once a husband and wife team to now me and 8 other people, now I'm doing 8 conversations to make sure that it's the right couples. Now I'm doing 8 email follow-ups, 8 schedules, shooting up to 5 or 6 weddings that weekend as a team, editing all that. And I just realized that the whole reason I left the jobs that I was doing before was because I wanted to actually spend time with my wife. I wanted to then, when we had kids, spend time with my kids. And now I was giving them less than I would have if I would have just stayed with the other job, because I was constantly booked, constantly, at my end. And so I realized that that wasn't for me, and I realized it when I had a major surgery. And we'll talk more about those things. But while I'm in the surgery and I'm sitting there, I'm like, I may not come out of this surgery. Like, it's weird when you have to like sign a living will and make sure that you've designated, all the things that you have to your family. And it makes you think about things. Yeah. And so we hear that, tomorrow's not promised to anybody all the time. It's on t-shirts, it's on mugs, it's on all this stuff, but when you really, really experience it, because this is something that like at the churches that I've been a part of, I've actually like preached about, like, hey, tomorrow's not promised. But when you're actually like sitting there and you're saying goodbye to your wife and kids with what might be the last time you say goodbye to your wife and kids, it has a different kind of feeling to it, And so as I'm getting ready for the surgery,
that's crazy.
I'm realizing if I get out of this, I'm not going back to this. Like, I'm just not. I'm not going back to this where I don't have time with them. So I was like, when you get out of this, God's got you, but you need to change some things. And the team was one of them. I needed to go back to being focused on just what I could do and not worry about what my bank account's going to look like. Who cares if you have a giant bank account, but you're actually not spending anything on the time and quality that you have with your family? So I was like, bump it, I'm done. And so when I got out of that surgery, I broke the team apart and was trying to figure out what was next. And it was crazy because there's a couple that I love by the name of George and Krissa, and the wedding I shot with them years ago was actually the last wedding that my wife ever shot with me. She was 8 months pregnant, and should have never been out there, but she loved this couple so much that she couldn't not be there. So as insurance, I hired a friend to come shoot it with us just in case, and it was the best idea because after like the first hour and a half, the wife was like, I'm going to the car and staying there the rest of the day. I was like, all right, cool. So, but they started on a nomadic journey as a husband and wife to just go experience the country and the world and see what God had for them out there. And so we were watching their journeys, and I'm looking at all their reels, and I was like, man, I wish I could do this. And I used to be in a band, and so there's a difference between what I used to do, where you shoot, you get on stage, you play, you spend a few hours in that city, but then you have to go to the next one. Like, rarely did we ever have like days in an area, so it was like if you experienced something, it was in short form. It was like the Instagram reels of experiencing life when I was in a band and on tour. And when me and my wife first got married, we wanted to do something. I wanted to do something like that. She was like, no, it's not going to happen, because I was doing solo music. But it just wasn't right. The money wasn't there. It's not like we could afford for me to do that. I just had a dream and I wanted it. So I'm watching their reels and I'm like, man, I wish I could do this. Try to get it out of my mind. Like, stop. You're not doing this. Like, what are you talking about? You have a 3-year-old. At the time, I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. You're not doing it. But then one day, just randomly, I came home from work and I'm sitting on the couch with my wife and we're watching a show and she's like, can I say something random and crazy? And I was like, sure. She's like, but I've been watching George and Chris's reels and I just wish that we could do something like that. And my jaw dropped because
that's crazy.
If you know me and my wife, I don't think that there is another couple in this world that is as polar opposites as her and I. Like, completely polar opposites. Like, it had to be God that we met because no other, movie would make sense where these two were into each other otherwise. And so we just are randomly, just crazy different. And so my jaw dropped and I was like, wait, what? And she's like, I know we can't do it. And I was like, why can't we? And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, why not? I just got rid of the team. I have nothing really holding me here. We just left the community that we had been part of for a long time because we felt like it was the right thing to do for our family. And maybe this is why all this has happened. Can't we just go do it? And she was like, are you serious? I was like, yeah, let's do it. I was like, at the end of the day, I've always lived my dreams, and you've always, since we've gotten married, come alongside those dreams. Like, they weren't necessarily yours. You just did them because you thought it was the supportive right thing to do. And this seems to be the first time we're both having the same exact dream at the same exact time. Let's do something that's ours, not something that's just mine. And so she was like, but what if we make a mistake and this isn't what we're supposed to do? And this isn't like wise words from Phil. I just felt like God said it. I was just like, I feel like God's saying there's nowhere that we can drive that we can't U-turn. Like, we can't ever drive too far out of his provision, out of his will for our lives. We can always make a U-turn if we find out it's wrong. So we looked into it, and we spoke to some families that are doing it or have done it, and we just thought it was the right thing to do for our family. So rented our townhome out in Tampa. We had this amazing company called Driftless out in Wisconsin renovate an old RV for us to turn it into like our home, but also my podcast and photo studio, and we hit the road. And so we're visiting family right now in Indiana. This is not my studio, by the way. Indiana got hit with some like crazy random like heat storm, and so my studio is like right now 100 degrees, and there's no way in God's green earth I could have done the podcast in there. So I'm in the kitchen, living room area. But yeah, you know, I'm loving it so far. We leave full time in about 2 weeks, so we've been visiting family, getting adjusted
How
to
exciting.
it. Yeah, and now we're just going to travel. And I'll still do weddings, but I'm cutting down. I'm doing about one a month. So I fly out to wherever it is, and I spend about 4 days in that area, and then I'll fly back and be with the family for the rest of the adventure.
That is so exciting.
If you're listening to this right now, just pause for 15 seconds and imagine what your life would be like if you made a decision like Phil right now. Like, what am I dreaming of? Can I make it happen right now? Like, what kind of life can I live? I'm so inspired by that, Phil. Like you just said, there's no reason why we can't design our own life. We're not forced to do a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing, bro. That's huge.
And one thing that I really, in this just last week, realized is I feel like sometimes as photographers, and I do this myself, I never wanted to be a wedding photographer, ever. Like, that was never a desire in my heart. I stumbled into it because of a friend that used to listen to my band, needed a second shooter because his fiance was sick. And then my boss saw me getting his photos to him, and she was like, oh, you're a wedding photographer, shoot my wedding. And before I could say, no, I'm not a wedding photographer, I said, sure, I'll have a contract to your email today. No clue what that looked like. And so I stumbled upon it. So I would be a complete liar if I said that, like, I'm living the dream job, okay? Because I think what we tend to do is forget that we could do something that we love that isn't necessarily living out a dream. You know, like, I love what I do. I love the couples that I get to shoot. I love the clients that I get to shoot. But if I'm honest, my dream job would have been making music full time, or would have been, you know, doing what I do on the side, which is talking about the New York Knicks through like the channel that I own called Morning Brew Sports with my brother and my guy Hector.
Yeah.
But that is something that I had to. There's a difference between doing something that you love and you're good at and living necessarily this dream, because my ultimate dream is to provide and care for my family. So doing one of those other things might be a fulfilling, self-fulfilling dream, but it wouldn't be fulfilling my ultimate dream, which is providing for my wife and kids. This, I get to do something that I love and that I enjoy, but I'm fulfilling my ultimate dream. And so I don't want to get preachy, because I know not everyone believes what I believe, and I'm okay with that. Like, I love people, you know, like, it is what it is. But but for me and my household, we are believers in the Lord. And so, Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the plans I have for you, and declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And a future and a hope, that's my real dream. Like giving my kids a future that I wasn't able to have for myself, because I came from a single family home and my mom did everything she could, but what she could do was make sure that we were healthy, make sure that we were taken care of, but not leave us, a legacy. And I want to do that, So for me, I'm living the dream. And another version of that says plans to prosper and not to harm you. And I know some of those other dreams, like if I would have been successful doing music at the time that I was doing it, that wouldn't have been prosperous for me and my family, because I had a problem with wanting to be known as that guy, like having kind of this idolatrous thing in my heart when it came to music. And so I saw a lot of people that I used to do music with or tour alongside of or play festivals with see that their character, like mine at that time, were not fit for full-time travel music lifestyle, and it ruined their families, or it ruined them as individuals. So for me, this might not be the American dream of I don't work a day in my life because I love every single thing that I do. And I'm like, okay, come on. Like, let's be real. Like, you don't always love what you do, like when that, bride after 6 months of you delivering the photos, all of a sudden doesn't like something, like you're just like, wait a minute. No, I don't love this part of my job. You are working right now because you're trying to figure out what's going on. But for me, living the dream is providing for my family, and photography is something that I enjoy and I'm good at, and that's a means to fulfill my actual dream, which is taking care of my wife and kids. So that's my whole little rant about like photography and life.
Hey guys, real quick, just to interrupt the podcast, we were talking about ways to see this grow. We're so excited to have an impact in a real way on the wedding photography world. We want to see it grow and become all that it's supposed to be, and you become all that you're supposed to be. One of the coolest things that we could see you do right now is give a 5-star review, subscribe to the podcast. That tells Apples and Spotify's and all that it's cool, that other people might like it. So that would mean the world to us, and I think it would mean a lot to the wedding photography world. So thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
That is so good.
I feel like we all need to just pause.
Pause again. Here we go. Part 2.
Every time you talk, it's like, okay, can we just hang on a second? Let me just sort of absorb all that just flew out at me.
Seriously. I'm like, is one of your dreams like an inspirational speaker? Because I think you should. That's definitely up there, man.
That was the graduation speech I wish I would have heard.
I'm ready to go to war for you, Phil. I'm serious. Like
it's crazy because
like Braveheart.
For years, my actual what I thought I'd be doing at this time was I thought I'd be a pastor years ago. Like way before I got into photography, I thought that's what I was going to do. And then when I got into the arts, like my whole thing was I love sharing, because everything that I've learned is not something that I've learned the easy way. Like the whole thing about me realizing that music was an idol for me came at a time that I was pursuing music, and my wife and I were in a car, and we're arguing because, she just didn't feel like I needed to be focused on certain things in that, with music at that time. And she was like, listen, if I asked you to choose between me and music, my fear is that you would choose music. And my response at that point should have been something that broke me, that like this woman that I just married, in this past year is thinking that she is second fiddle to music. But instead I was like, you knew I did music before you married me. And that's when I realized I had an idol in my heart, and so the things that I share, I want to share because I learned them the hard way. And I would love to make sure that other people don't have to learn it the hard way either, because it sucks learning it the hard way.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's not, take it, change the now. What if it's music? It could be photography. It could be growing your business.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that I feel in my own personal life is I love growing a business. I love watching numbers come in. I love to watch, a brand explode. And I definitely feel the Lord over the past couple of years is teaching me that's not your whole identity. Like there's so much more than just doing that. Like just spending time with your wife is just as, if not 100% more valuable
Yeah.
than being in the office 24/7.
Yeah.
And so, that's one of those things that within Shoot the Veil, we want to encourage everybody to pursue a great business for the reason of having a great life.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's a balance to that. There's a balance to passions. There's a balance to having a healthy life. And so that's our whole theology behind it, is how can we use the gift of photography to, one, make a great business, and two, have a great life doing the things that we love. And so just giving that input, even from music and with photography for yourself, is so valuable, and what a great lesson. So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
And that's the thing.
Phil, I see the passion. Yeah, go for it.
What I was going to say is, for anyone that's watching, like you were saying, there's nothing wrong with building a healthy and successful business. The question always for me has to now be, because I know how extreme I can be. Like, I have that personality of going to extremes. So you have to go at what cost? Like, I will build this brand, but at what cost? For me, it wasn't benefiting our family, having more team members and building this monstrosity of a brand. Look at different photographers, like we talked about Miles earlier. Miles knows how to do that fine line of building a really successful brand, but also being super dad. Like, Miles is great at that.
Right.
Like all the things that he's at with his kids and traveling with his family while still building his brand. That's something that he's wired for, and he doesn't sacrifice one for the other. Or John Branch, like John Branch 4. If you don't follow him, that's my guy. That's like my brother. But, he got to a point where his business grew and the YouTube channel started to grow, and he realized, I'm the kind of guy that his family grows like this. John Branch and his wife look at each other and they have another kid. Like, it's crazy. So like John Branch is like trying to build a freaking NBA like full roster in his home. But he saw, can't really build this YouTube channel and shoot the amount of weddings that I shoot. Like, I just can't, and still be the dad I need to do. So he cut back on the amount of weddings that he took on, because education was a little more important to him than the big check. And so figuring out how to be successful is not just figuring out how to have more zeros in your bank account, because I've had that and it doesn't actually pan out in the end. Like, it can be cool to have money, but if your family's miserable at the same time, then you're not successful. So build your brand, do that. And if you don't have wife and kids, or a husband and kids, like, go at it. Like, it's way better than hanging out, at a bar on a Friday night. Build your brand, but do things in priority.
So, question. I'm a photographer. I love one extreme or the other. I want to be the one man live life, or the other, like build a big giant thing. You are good at helping people think through the process of choosing one of those others. You're very intentional about brand and it being personalized, your success personalized. So talk to me. I'm that young photographer. How am I going to make those choices to get me on the right direction?
Yeah. So before I answer the question, I will say that my initial brand before me and my wife got married was, my brand was Just Do It. Like, I was the Nike of human being. Like, I didn't think about things. I just did it. Like, I didn't care if there was actually water in the pool, because I didn't check. I just ran and dove in, and whatever was there was there. So this, where her being a polar opposite to me is actually like a huge disguise, because it actually honed me in and pulled me in to kind of actually have to start not just living as Mr. Enneagram 7 that just has an idea and goes for it, but takes that idea and says, just doing it is probably not healthy. I need to put a plan in place. And so she helps me actually realize a plan is needed. So that's where it's cool to have that balance. So now she'll give a stamp of approval, but after making sure that I actually thought things through instead of just doing it. But when it comes to those two paths, neither path is a wrong path. Like, both paths are beautiful in themselves. But what a lot of people don't think about, and I heard this in a podcast from an actual church years ago, and then also through a Moment podcast, but in different forms, was that the big problem is not doing those things. The big problem is that we as creators like to think the next 5 minutes instead of the next 5-10 years. And that's the problem. Is that we're not thinking about long haul, and we're also not thinking about realistically what works for us. So I'll say, after having and living in an RV for about 5 months, it is not this glorious Instagram thing that you see when you follow like some of these nomadic people, where it's like, look at me, I'm on the side of the mountain every single day, or I'm in a waterfall. Like, okay, yeah, but what about the freaking giant 3-axle tire that blew out on the highway, and you have a 39-foot trailer and it's 1:30 in the morning? Well, that happened the first night that we owned the RV and we were driving with it. So like, what about the fact that if you don't have a composting toilet, you actually have to dump your fecal matter through a gray tank every 3 days? Like, let's stop with the like, oh, I'm gonna be this nomadic like photographer. Cool. This is what comes with it. Like, I'm in my living room right now, and this is actually take 32 of this part of the podcast because nomadic internet sucks, So let's be real. Like, where I'm at, I just had to pay for a month membership to go to a freaking workspace an hour away to download some video files, since I'm video editing for another photographer. So no, it's not all it's cracked up to be in certain areas. And if you're not built for that, if you're not built for the fact that your AC might not work and you have to live in the living room for 4 days at a time, that's life sometimes in an RV. But there's beautiful things that come with it, like, I'm in Indiana right now. In 2 weeks, I'll be in Wisconsin. From then, we're working in Maine. It's awesome. It's cool. But does it work for you and your lifestyle? Does it work for what you're trying to do? My couples, I'm completely transparent with my couples. Like, I'm not trying to mask this journey from them. Like, they know, hey, I'll be flying in 4 days before your wedding just to make sure I'm there. I'll be shooting your wedding. We're good. Da-da-da-da. But if you feel like, well, my couples aren't going to accept that, I'm going to have to keep my nomadic journey separate from my business, then it's not going to work. Like, you need to be completely open and honest with your couples. My couples love following our journey. They're asking me, in messages, where are you guys today? Like, da-da-da-da. Or we'll have a meeting and they'll be like, where are you coming from? Where are you right now? Like, we wish we were there. So be completely transparent if that's the life that you're living. If you have it to where you can grow a team to 8, do it. Like, my biggest regret from that is when I started growing I didn't have kids yet, but I also, me and my wife had never experienced what it was like to have money, like, in our lives. Like, my mom was a single mom, busted her butt. We were in New York City. So at the time, we didn't feel like we ever didn't have, but we also, once I got out and I realized, hey, not having a father really kicked us, in the teeth for a lot of things, especially going to college and having to take out all these loans and stuff like that. So when we first had money, me and my wife never knew what that was like. So it was like, hey, we're going to do this, interview with this couple at this upscale cocktail bar. We're going to take this couple out to this restaurant. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Money was coming in like crazy, so it was going out like crazy. And now that we have kids, we're like, oh, crap. Like, we should have been saving a huge portion of that. We didn't need to take every to a steak dinner. A coffee would have been fine, So figuring out, some of these things, like, okay, you may be able to build that now, But are you planning for when you're going to have kids? Are you planning for, what's going to happen in 5 years? Set yourself up for success, because you may be able to do the 8-member thing right now, but in 5 years that may not be feasible. So if you didn't set yourself up for success for when it's no longer feasible, now you have this empire that you feel like you have to keep because you're not going to financially be able to sustain if you let it all go. And so figuring out what is the actual future for you, what actually matters to you. And it's going to be different for everybody. Like, there's certain people that, building this lifestyle of success is all that matters to them. Cool. Do what you got to do, go for it. Some people that just want to live this destination wedding photographer journey. They're not married. They don't have kids. They just want to go to a different, awesome, cool, Instagram looking place every single week of their lives and shoot a wedding. Cool. Do it. But sometimes we live through the lens of Instagram instead of reality, and we go, oh man, I wish I was going week in and week out as a destination wedding photographer like that photographer is. That's my goal. Well, do you forget the fact that your wedding photography business doesn't really have that kind of pull yet? Do you realize that you have a wife and 3 kids and you can't just be gone every single week for 5 days at a time? Like, think realistically, So I can't tell a person what their journey is without knowing what their actual life is, what their actual values are. For me, the brand of your photography it has to be a function of the brand / worldview that you are as a person. So for me, education is more important to me than magazine features. So I'm not going to focus on how many magazines can feature my work. I'm going to focus on what photographers need my help. Like, how do I help them? That's going to be my focus. Some people don't care about education. Some people are so great at photography, and then I go and I see them at a workshop, and I'm like, oh my goodness, you need to take a high school lecture class because you are horrible at this. I have no clue what you just said in the last hour. Education is not your gifting. Keep shooting those mountain weddings though, bro. You're killing it. So be realistic on the skill sets that you have and the worldview that you have. And then we can build your brand from that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So good. So you want to align your brand, your ideal business to fit what you'd like your future to be.
Yeah.
And not for a short term, like here I want to do. You got to think a little long term so that one, it's substantial and it's manageable for you, because you, as you said, you came to a point where you're like, you know what? I'm going to grow this team to 8 members and we're going to do 5 weddings a weekend. We're doing 100 plus weddings a year. But money wasn't all of it for you. You want a good life. You want time with your wife and your kids. And maybe at the time you weren't thinking of that. And so what I'm hearing is, if you had foreknowledge and foresight, you would maybe say, let me think about the future of this more so than what sounds good to just money and just, items in our life.
Jumping off that, I actually have another question. Would you have done it differently if you started over? Would you start with just the single, like you as the single photographer, and or do you think there's seasons when it's appropriate to go to extremes and then change?
Oh, there's definitely seasons, and to the previous question, I don't regret how I did it at all. I regret not handling it the right way, and not preparing myself for the future. Because at the first beginning stage of me growing the team and having, the finances coming in like crazy, I didn't have 2 kids. I wasn't worried about necessarily like that. However, if I would have been wise, I would have used my money differently. I would have saved for seasons like this, where I decided, hey, I'm a step back from the 7-person team because I want to be focused on my wife and my kids. So now I would have had more than enough money saved for this season, where I could have even been like, hey, I'm going to take the year off and travel with the family,
Right.
I don't know if I necessarily would have done that, because for me, it's hard not to work at all. Like, retirement's going to, I don't know if that'll ever be a thing, because I like doing things. But I would have prepared myself for this season. So businesses change all the time. Like, they do. We were watching something on the History Channel the other day. And we're here in Indiana, and White Castle is huge here, just like it is where I grew up in New York. And so me and my wife, we went and got White Castle, and then we were watching the History Channel, and it was showing the food that shaped America. And it was talking about how White Castle actually started with two guys. And one of them, as much growth for the business at that time, and the possibility for a lot bigger growth, which it wound up happening, his heart changed and was like, my heart's not in this. I want to fly. I want to be a pilot. This is what I want to do. That doesn't mean what he did when he was with White Castle wasn't successful or wise for him as a business. He actually found that passion while he was becoming successful with White Castle, and then realized that the season changed. Right. And so I feel like everybody's journey is going to be different, and things are going to change. There's going to be mountaintops, there's going to be valleys, there's going to be, levels of success on both ends where you say, this could probably be successful, and so could this. What is right for me, though? What is right for what I'm walking into in this next season of life? So I think for me, my biggest advice for photographers is figure out what is going to have longevity for what you have, and what can set you up for success in the future, even if things look different. And so that's why building on something that matters and something that's not just trendy and cool is important. Like for me, our motto has been, whether I shoot one wedding every month or whether I go back to the days where me and my wife shot 72 as a husband and wife team, like our motto has always been real moments meets fine art. Why? Because that's who we are. We love actual real moments where a couple can go, holy crap, I remember exactly what we felt in that moment. But we also want a couple to look and say, holy hell, we look so hot in these photos. I can't believe that's us. That's something that's going to stand the test of time, no matter how long we shoot, or how many we shoot. So finding a brand that doesn't get built on something that change with the times. Like, don't just be trendy for what's cool now. Do something that's going to sustain, so that if you have to pivot, a pivot foot's a great thing. I'm a huge basketball guy. A pivot foot is the greatest thing in the world, because it allows you to hold on to what you have and go, what? If I go this way, it's a turnover, or I'm going to screw up, or I'm going into something that I shouldn't. But I still have my pivot foot, so I can go this way, this way, this way, and gives you a full circle of being able to move and distribute to where you have to go. So use a pivot foot in your business. Build something that can pivot.
Hey guys, if you're already a member of Shoot the Veil, feel free to skip through this. If you're not, I want to talk to you about something that could change your career as a wedding photographer. Shoot the Veil is a new platform that is built by wedding photographers for wedding photographers. This platform has everything you need, from courses from creators you love, posing and planning, follow-alongs, and exclusive interviews with some of the world's best wedding photographers. And on top of that, we give away some crazy cool gear every month. If you're not in, go check it out and download it now.
Great analogy.
That analogy suddenly made so much sense. Like, a pivot foot. So are there some key characteristics? I've heard at least two things. The key characteristics of a pivot foot. One is sort of saving for the future to give you some stability. Yep. So I guess, to keep the metaphor, a pivot foot has to be stable.
Yep.
And then having a brand that's authentically you, that could go with different ways. So maybe stability and strength are key factors of a pivot foot. I'm just like inventing a keynote here for you. Take it and run with it.
Spot on.
But like that pivot foot idea is something we can take away. You got to be stable. That's finances. And you've got to be strong. And that's a brand that is real and true to you, that is timeless. Is there anything else you would add to that?
And so the thing about a pivot foot is it's attached to you. Like, it's actually a part of you. You know, like when it comes to the game can change. The ball moves, other people move, but that pivot foot is something you can always rely on. No one else has control of that pivot foot but you. Like, no other player on your team, no other player on the other team, the coaching crowd has any control over anything that has to do with your pivot foot. You are in full control of that. And so why the pivot foot is so important is that it doesn't matter where you're at in your career. If those things are who you are, those transcend the test of time. That pivot foot of who I am as a brand, if you have your brand as that pivot foot, you could be 4 years into it, 10 years into it, 20 years into it, but since your pivot foot was based on who you are, that transcends all times. No matter what you have to pivot to, you are still that stable, strong force because that is who you are. Your brand was built upon that pivot foot.
Wow.
Great stuff. Man,
That's so good, man. That'll go a long way. I think that's really what this podcast is all about. Like we heard,
that's what I was wanting for.
like your crazy life has given us an example of an extreme pivot. And now you just landed the plane on like how that actually worked. You had a pivot foot that was strong, stable, and was authentic to you.
So good.
Wow.
Thanks for spilling all that on us, man. That is some really good advice.
We opened the faucet, it just all rushed out.
I need to listen to this after we're done with it. Just really just take it to heart. I'm really excited to hop onto this after the pod. We're gonna, everybody listening, we're gonna kind of take an avatar of a photographer and use some of the tips and tricks and analogies and theologies that Phil has and try to apply that to branding a photographer. And maybe some of those features of this avatar align with you and you can take some things home. Phil, thank you so much for the time you've given us today and the knowledge you've shared. Super excited to see where things go in the after the pod. And everybody, if you're not already following, go check out Phil Porto on Instagram. Is there anywhere else we can send the listeners to check you out?
Yeah, so Instagram, just / Phil Porto, philporto.com. And the last thing I'll end before we go into the pod is we talked about it before and you guys asked if I was okay sharing it. I do want to say, don't let anything stop your dream. Whatever that dream may be. And
let's do it.
the reason I say that is one of the things that, you know, you guys were told about me from Miles Whitboyer was, you know, the struggles that I've had medically, you know, and so when it comes to photography, photography is something that just based on paper, you would not think that I would be able to achieve or, you know, have seen the success that I've had, you know. And one of those main issues is that since I was 2 years old, I've only been able to see out of my right eye. I had cancer when I was 2. And I battled cancer, rhabdomyosarcoma, and I've had a cataract behind this eye since I was 2 years old. And so everything that I see is just through one eye. And so as a visual industry, someone would say something like that and probably be like, oh, you won't be able to do this or you won't be able to do that, whatever your limitations may be. But if God puts a gift in your life and you know that you have this gift and this talent, those things don't really matter. Like I've had that, I've had a brain tumor, you know, when I was 25, I had, you know, a huge tumor removal, you know, 2 years ago behind that same left eye. And all those things would on paper disqualify me from being a successful photographer. But those things should not limit you. And that should be something in your brand, is that everything around you can try to stop what you feel like you're called to do, but only you can actually stop you. Like you can be the only thing that actually prohibits you from doing what you feel called to do. And so that's my encouragement to anyone that's listening. Don't let anybody, one of my tattoo artist who did a huge portion of my tattoos was born and still is considered colorblind. And yet he is a bright, colorful, traditional tattoo artist. Shout out to Billy White. If you're in Ohio, hit him up. So this is a guy that should not be able to succeed in his industry. And yet he's incredible. Why? Because he doesn't let this is why you can't be good actually tell himself that he can't be good at something. So that's my encouragement to anyone that's listening. Stick around. If you're not subscribed to these guys, you need to be, because this is a beautiful, beautiful platform, and we're going to talk some really cool stuff in this next portion. So if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe to these guys now.
Wow. Phil Porto, everybody.
Wow.
Yeah, this is awesome. We'll see you in the after the pod. This is going to be so good.
It's going to be fun.
Thank y'all for checking this out. We'll see you next time.